Good morning. Hello, you coming today? Hey, you gonna come check the cattle with me? Come on. Go on, get up. How's it going, folks? Cam Griffin from Binui Family Grazing. Welcome to the channel where I try and release a regenerative grazing, grass farming video every Sunday. I've got little Layla with me today. She's going to come help me check on the cattle and we'll shift them onto some new pasture. We had about 55 mil up until yesterday arvo when I left this block, so we could have got maybe another 10 mil overnight, but we'll check. This block was pretty wet yesterday. We're still down grazing on the flat where, as the name implies, there's not much drainage, so there's a fair bit of water laying on the surface, and I'll just see whether I'll shift the cattle twice today or whether I can leave it at one, just because I want to avoid any pugging or any damage to that soil surface. Quite a bit lower than I'd like, but bit of water around. So you can definitely see they've been camping up on this hill there, just trying to avoid that wet a bit and stay dry. This is that little heifer that was in the last video. She ended up having that calf about 2 days later. Little bull calf. He's doing well, but he's had a pretty rough first few days into the world with the rain and really low temperatures, but she's doing well. She's a great mother, and the good feed that she's been on has really helped her keep that milk up. So up on this bank there is still a pretty fair amount of summer grasses, our panics and our Rhodes grass, and some bluegrass out here. So I thought this morning, just while I'm setting up a few paddocks on foot, because I can't really bring the quad bike down. I can, but I don't want to be putting wheel tracks out in the pasture, that I'd just talk a little bit about what we do and how I move cattle in the wet so that we can reduce compaction and pugging, and what we can do to store and hold as much water as possible when we do get the rain. So this is the old strip that they were in yesterday, a rectangular paddock, and all I do is just make a little laneway back to the water trough, and that's so that they don't go back and they don't trample, try and regraze any of the old growth. So one thing that's important to recognise, I think, with this holistic style of grazing, where we're trying to mimic nature with our grazing mob, is that we're trying to rehydrate the landscape. And that means basically we're not coming back and regrazing a paddock until the plant's fully recovered and there's enough biomass there that 1/3 can be trampled to feed the soil surface, 1/3 can feed the animal, and then the other third can be left standing as a solar panel to collect more sunlight, and the plant can continue to grow. But in the context of trying to rehydrate the landscape, capture as much water as we can and reduce runoff on our properties and reduce that damage to the soil surface from that hoof impact. It's that 1/3 of the plant that's being trampled that's going to have the biggest impact on those things. Essentially all I'm doing is really just using high densities of cattle as a tool simply to help me manage the landscape. Naturally, by grazing in tighter mobs, a higher percentage of the plant's stem and leaves are going to be crimped and crushed and trampled onto the soil surface, where they can kind of act as a bit of a soil armor. And it's that soil armor that's going to determine how water reacts when it rains on our landscape. On the other side of the property, where it's sloping down to the creek, and we got the creek just here, we want to hold as much nutrients and reduce as much erosion as we can from going right down into the creek and polluting our waterways going out to sea. So by folding over this sponge, we're really slowing down that overland flow and holding as much water as we can on our property, because we know it's not how much rain you get, it's how much rain you can hold. And you know, you hear folks saying, oh, I got 100 mil, but if 50 mil ran straight off into the creek, then you can't use it. It's about how much we can use, how much we can store, keep in our soils and use in drier periods. Now that we kind of get how important, I suppose, the soil armor is in slowing down that overland flow and really helping us infiltrate as much water as we can so that we can use it at different times of the year. And what do I do with the cattle that I'm custom grazing? Well, I tend to base most of my decisions in the wet on how much plant litter there already is on the soil surface when you're coming back around to that paddock. So on some of my lease blocks, the plant spacing in between the plants is just bare soil. And having this higher stock density and these numbers on a smaller patch of land for a short period of time, you can really do a lot of damage by pugging up and compacting the soils when it's wet, because then once it starts to dry out, then it's like concrete. It's a really compact area and water just runs straight off it. So it takes a long time for that patch of land to recover and to start to grow some productive forages again. So on that block in particular, I'd probably look into having a sacrifice paddock, maybe up near the yards, that if you're going to get maybe 3 or 4 days of consistent rain, go and get a $50 hay bale or something, just to give the rest of the farm a break so that you're not doing damage all the way across it. Though on blocks like this where I've got quite a lot of soil armor, it's that vegetative mat that acts as a bit of a buffer between the hoof and the soil surface, which keeps it from sealing over. The hoof also creates a little indentation which acts as like a cup, and that helps us to hold more water on our landscape. If you can imagine, all across where we're grazing in the wet, we've got these little cups that are all holding, you know, maybe 100 mil of water and keeping it from flowing off. So there's a couple things you can do. You can speed up your moves. That sometimes means that you're going to get back to those recovering paddocks a bit quicker. You can have a sacrifice paddock that obviously you're willing to let become damaged and become crusted over, unless you're going to roll out a bit of hay or some organic material. Or you can give the paddocks just a little bit more width or a little bit more size about them, so that there's not as much density on such a small area that it's not going to impact and damage that particular paddock division. So the miserable weather really decided to ramp itself up. It started blowing a gale and we got a bit more rain, so I thought I'd get the jobs I had to get done out at the cattle done and focus on this little YouTube video a little bit later. But I hope just sharing how we rotate cattle in the wet weather might have helped some people, and just some ideas that they can use as well. But yeah, have a good week, have a good day, and I'll catch you later.